All right. It's about 9:33, so we'll try to try not to make you too uncomfortable in here this morning. Good to see everyone. Good to see everyone here. We're gonna start a new series this morning, and as you settle in, don't mean to try to make you too uncomfortable. We have the title of the series up here behind me on the projector, and I think last time I was with you and taught in here was almost a year ago, and does anybody remember what we talked about last time I was teaching in here? Ten Commandments. Thank you. All right. We did. We talked about the 10 Commandments last time I was in here teaching, and just took a look at the 10 Commandments, and it seems like such an old, unrelative document today, but hopefully you'll recall we looked at that document, if we can call it that, that God gave us really to say, here's how life works best. Here's how life works best. To me, I'm always intrigued with the nature of God and what God intends for us, and what He wants from us, and His plan for us. And so, really, this series, I'm hoping to do a lot of the same thing. because as we really look at things and people that God worked with directly in the Bible, that God used in the Bible, He used them in some uncomfortable moments, and just wanted to take a look at some of that as we move throughout the next 6-7 weeks. I don't know how long it'll take us really, but we'll figure that out as we go. And it's just interesting to me how the world today chases comfort so much. I don't know that it's probably always been the case, but it seems to me that it's an ever increasing chase. Here we go. Back that way? Okay. Yeah. I have to hold my mouth just right. We'll figure this out eventually. If we run out of time, I'll blame you guys. You are slow listeners. So. Is that it? There we go. All right. We did. Just think about how the world, it seems like with each passing generation, just is more about comfort and chasing comfort more and more. We'll talk about younger generations and if that's really true, but and how detrimental that can be to us and trying to hear God, trying to listen to God, trying to know what God has planned for us in our lives, because really what we chase, the human tendency is to chase softer, easier, more comfortable, whatever words I could use to describe there. And really the more you study and you look at God and His very nature, not to say that God doesn't want us to be comfortable and enjoy some of the wonderful things in life that He created, but a lot of the times I find myself looking at that and thinking it distances us from God and His nature and His will for us. Because rarely do you find in the Bible, maybe nowhere, do you find where God is trying to just tee someone up and just make their life the most pleasurable, most comfortable, nicest scenario that we could ever think of or design. Technology nowadays and all the inventions that we encounter, and I'll be 52 years old here pretty soon. I heard that over there. Most of you in this room, maybe other than Jeremy back there in the back, have been around. Oh, well, I see Keith and Meredith over here. Okay. We got several that are younger than I am, but most of you in here have experienced more life than I have, okay? And so you've seen a lot more invention over your lifetime and technology, and I can think back to when I was a kid and some of those things that you just go, good heavens, I can't believe we used to be limited to that phone cord, we could only move, By the time I was a teenager, we had that long cord that could go 30 feet away from the phone and all that. Just one example of some of the things that have been invented, but everything really is designed to try to make your life easier, more comfortable. And you can just look at some of the things there, from appliances to computers and all that kind of stuff. My wife loves her heated seat in our car. You can get that kind of stuff now that just makes life so much more comfortable and easier on you. And if I were to ask around the room and I were to say, okay, what's your idea of just perfect, wonderful comfort, we would have a lot of different answers. Some of you would think of a scene like this right here, sitting in a little chair by the beach, over the ocean. Just, I mean, that's tranquil. That is your idea of just ultimate comfort. And probably some of you really think about all the time, man, I can't wait to get to that next vacation time and go there. We got this plan down the road and all that kind of stuff. Others of you would probably say this is more of you, the mountains, and especially with us experiencing all the 105, 106 degree temperatures that we've experienced. And so you want to get away somewhere cool and sit out on a porch or in a hammock and just, this is comfort. This might be in the forefront of your mind. You think about all the enjoyment of being somewhere like that. This is my, putting me at Pebble Beach Golf Course for a couple of days and let me play a few rounds and chill out around on the Pacific, and just how beautiful that is. And all those things, by the way, are just beautiful, godly creations, aren't they? So I'll remind you as we go along, there's nothing wrong with enjoying and being a part of that kind of comfort that God has created. We have this season coming around the corner. Some of you, boys, pumpkin spice coffees and lattes and sitting on the couch under a blanket and just chilling, and nothingness is what we call that in my house. We're with Maddie coming through high school in recent years, and Grant's still in there. There were certain weeks where we had, seemed like 14 events, and we just longed for nothingness. Tonight's a nothingness night. We get to just chill, sit, and that's comfort, in a lot of your minds. And still, more of you might be here. Just leave me in bed for a few extra hours, and I know the sun's coming up, but I don't care. Close the curtains. This is what I dream of. This is what comfort is to me. This is where I want to be. It is just our human nature, it seems, that we are just drawn to things that are easier, more comfortable, that are not going to push us, stretch us, motivate us. Probably at any age. I don't know, I've never been 70 years old before. Never been 80, okay? But I hope to be one of these days. And but I would imagine, I'll probably eventually teach this class to a little younger group. But I would imagine it's the same way, and we'll talk about this as we go through the series for people of all ages in here. We're drawn to comfort. We want to kind of move to cruise control. We want to make things as easy as possible on ourselves. Path of least resistance is what you sometimes hear about, right? And I think it's about, our brains that is it serotonin? Is that what I'm thinking of? That happiness chemical in our brains that are drawn to just feed off of the serotonin. But I really feel like today in 2023, it feels like the chase for that, the desire for that, has just increased exponentially. And I say that because I think back to my grandfather telling stories. I feel like their generation did tough and hard, difficult, way better than we do today. Does that make sense to you? My grandfather, who's been gone for, 15, 20 years now, but he grew up over here towards Briggs and fought in World War II and all the, loved sitting, visiting with him about all the old stories and this, I can see him right in the middle of these kiddos right out here, and life just, I feel like they did tough, they did hard, they did difficult, they did uncomfortable better than we do today. We'll talk about, they didn't have a choice, did they? That is something that I've thought about. When you didn't have a choice, you did what you had to do to survive, and that was it. And so I'll ask these questions. Is the constant chase of comfort making younger generations, however you want to define that, generations that are younger than you are, is it making them less resilient, less dependable or reliable? And maybe most importantly, is it making younger generations less available? You kind of go, well, what do you mean by less available? Well, you can kind of fill in the blank there, but as we look at what God wants from us in this series, less available maybe to God to use you. We'll talk more about that, but in my mind, I do ask these questions, and I'm part of that younger generation, at least to you guys, I am. But there are, of course, plenty of generations, at least when I think of my children and generations following them, to where I feel like that's the direction we're headed, the direction we're moving. This is my opinion. Today, more and more people believe that if something makes you physically or emotionally uncomfortable, then you shouldn't have to do it. Okay? And then I've got down there at the bottom, I'll just quit. I see that a lot in, seems like I see it a lot in young people nowadays, especially in the workforce. Okay? If this job is hard, if it's difficult, if it takes me out of my comfort zone at all, then their answer is I'll just quit. I'll just walk away and quit. We could think of several other categories where that is probably true, right? Could be true right here in our own church congregation, church families all over Burnett, the state, or Texas. If I don't like the way that sounds, if I don't like God's message, His stance on you fill in the blank, then I'll just walk away and I'll quit. That's too difficult for me. That makes me uncomfortable. God's truth makes people uncomfortable. It does. Okay? And maybe here in a few weeks we'll talk more about that, especially from the younger generations, of what they hear nowadays about God's truth, which is really the same truth it's always been. God's truth's never changed. But it feels like it makes more and more people uncomfortable when they hear those kinds of things nowadays. And so what's their answer? Well, I'll walk away. I'll quit. Makes me uncomfortable. We could name other categories. Marriages. Things have gotten difficult in my marriage. I'm not willing to work at it. This wasn't how I drew it up, so I'll walk away. I'll quit. Okay? Those are the types of things that, and it's not just my opinion. You can go look at the data. You can go look at the rate of people quitting jobs. You can go look at the rate of divorces. You can go look at the rate, all that stuff. People leaving the church. We can go on and on. The data's there. It's a fact. That's what people do. They give up on hard stuff. They walk away from it because it's tough. It requires them to be a little bit uncomfortable. Why does God pull us out of our comfort zones? There's my first question. We'll look at some of those things that I believe that God does that, but I'll throw another graphic up here that I thought was cool. That was, most of y'all watched the Twilight Zone back in the day, and this is, we're getting ready to leave our comfort zones. Why does God pull us, or maybe I'll just start with the question, does He? I think He does. I think it's without question that most of us probably live lives that we go, oh, this is not a real comfortable life. There's been a lot of hard things in my path. Rarely do I just feel absolute comfort and things are easy and all hunky-dory and good. But just a handful of... Right here?
I think, I think it's always been the case, but definitely in the world today, sin is so abundant, right? Like, and it's just out in the open more than anything. Just like with homosexuality, transgender, so many things of that nature are becoming the norm, right? Well, that's not normal, shouldn't be.
Right.
My personal opinion, or my biblical opinion. And so, like, for us to be Christians, we sometimes have to stand up, and in some ways that can be uncomfortable because you have to go against the grain of what society thinks is the grain these days, right? And so, I mean, being a Christian is not always easy. I think, especially starting out as a young Christian, somebody who's, like for me, I grew up in a Christian home, so for me, it was easier to be a Christian than somebody that's did not grow up in a Christian home. And so, for those people, becoming a Christian, they have to go out of the norm, in my opinion. And so for them, it can be uncomfortable to do that because their friends are not doing that, or whatever the case may be. Society is just telling them not to do that. And so that ultimately is putting them in an uncomfortable situation, just because, like for me, being a Christian, certain parts of Christianity for me are pretty easy. Some parts are probably not, but I think we all have our struggles in some form or fashion. But like, I just think that being a Christian cannot always be the easiest, especially for somebody who's a new Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that takes people out of their normal, everyday comfort
Yeah.
zone because they have to go against the grain.
And what I hear from Keith there is that kind of what we were touching on a while ago. God's truths, they do not change according to what makes us comfortable or uncomfortable, and they never will. They never will. Maybe we need to look at some of the things how we handle others as a church and all that kind of stuff, but not to the point where we're trying to change God's truth because we're uncomfortable with it. Few of the things that, just real quick, I'll run through these and maybe we'll look at them as we go through this series. One of the reasons I have here that God makes us uncomfortable is growth. God always wants you to be better, to grow closer to His nature. And if we all think back, and let's say we all go back, try to think back, some of you way back, I don't mean to go that far back, some of you a little further back than me, but if you think about when you were 18, 19 years old, and maybe how you thought, how you acted, how you, how close or far away, maybe I should say, to the nature of God you were at that age. And I were to say, can you give me a little bit of how much have you grown since then? Some of us can't, I don't like to think back when I was a 17, 18, 19-year-old knucklehead. But I feel like I'm still growing, and I feel like I always will. And I think that's one of the reasons why God makes you uncomfortable and realize some uncomfortable situations. I would say another is to prepare you, similar to growth, but maybe to prepare you for a purpose that God wants you to carry out. Maybe a mission that God has planned for you, and He's getting you ready for that mission that maybe you can't see, but He knows that is in your future. Okay? I think that's a reason why God makes you uncomfortable. I think God makes you uncomfortable to test you. We'll talk more about that here in a minute as I'll show you another graphic, but I think he wants to know exactly what he's working with. That's a little bit scary, isn't it? Okay? And I know we kind of go, well, God already knows who I am, what he's working with, but there seems to be a reason for God making us uncomfortable that's a little bit of a test to go, okay, we think we've grown to this point, but let's see what the truth is. Let's figure out exactly where we stand. Let's figure out maybe how well you do uncomfortable. It's a little bit of a scary thought, isn't it? I think another reason is so that he can use me, okay? That's why he makes me uncomfortable. Use me for a particular purpose. And we'll talk about some people in the Bible that God used, but I really have a hard time finding anyone in the Bible that God used for a significant purpose that he didn't make uncomfortable first. Help me out. Bring that to me at some point if you find that person. But I find it's hard for me to find where God pulled someone off a vacation chair or a cruise ship or whatever and said, hey, I know your life is just lovely and perfect and comfortable, and I'm just going to use you in this lovely and comfortable setting. Okay? So usually, to be able to use us requires God putting us in some uncomfortable situations. And then finally, I just put up here, and this is part of using us, but to use maybe our situation or our difficult time, our uncomfortable situations that have hit us, our difficulties in life, to use us as an example to others that need that kind of encouragement because they're going to encounter the same thing that we did. Okay? Maybe even to be a mentor through what we experienced that was difficult to other people that are going to experience that eventually. And I know as I'm teaching this, and I'll say it again, I think this will be a very relevant class to teach to the, if we get all the 20, 30, 40-year-olds in here, I think this could be a very relevant class to them. But as I look around the auditorium and I think about the age that all of us are at, okay, and I think about the people that have impacted, mentored me, it's always been people that are older than me, okay? It's always been people that have been in their, I'm in my 50s. It's always been people that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So to think, as I talk about some of this, to think, hey, I've experienced all the uncomfortable. I'm good. I'm retired now. I'm just interested in being on as many cruise ships, as many vacations as I can possibly be on. I think you're of the wrong mindset, okay? Because I believe you can still make a tremendous impact at any age. Does your desire for comfort put you in a bad frame of mind when God sends something uncomfortable your way? We just talked about all those things that God can send your way and why He does that. And we experience so many of those day after day. And to me, it's a little bit of recognizing it in our mind as to what's actually happening. Why is this coming my direction? Why is God allowing me to experience this? Why has God put me in this situation right now today? I prayed for everything just to go perfect this week, and I just wanted lots of comfort and everything to be just golden, and here's how I designed this week. It's not going that way, okay? Y'all know our son Grant plays football for the Bulldogs, and I always think about this, having been a coach for lots and lots of years, and now I'm an athletic director, watch these guys out there in the 105, 106, 107-degree days over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And I know as a coach, it was always important to go put these kiddos in tough, hard, hot, uncomfortable situations. Okay? Why would we be interested in doing that? Oh, because Coach Jones is a jerk and we hate Coach Jones. You know, that's a lot of times that's what kids, think and believe. But why is it important to do that? Why do we need to see that? Why do we even need to make them maybe line up on a line and run sprints and back and forth? It's not just so we can have a good laugh and enjoy someone else's uncomfortable moments. Yeah, enjoy someone else's pain. To make them better in terms of probably resiliency is where you're going. Just strength. What Kelvin just said, we mentioned a while ago about what God does with us. To see exactly what I'm working with. To see if when I'm in that football game and it's third, fourth quarter and everybody's really, really tired, who's going to quit on me? Who's going to go, this is too tough for me, I'm out, I'm quitting, I'm done?
So do you tell them that?
It'd be great, wouldn't it? Yeah. It's an outstanding question, It's a great question. And yet, in my experience, and from what I see out of our current coaches, let's say, at Barnett High School, yes, they talk to the kiddos about that sort of thing when they gather them up and visit with them before practice or after practice. It's an advantage that we probably have in those situations that we don't have necessarily from God. God doesn't really call you up and go, hey, I'm about to test you here. Okay, it's all going to be good, but I'm going to test you. But we do. I think those kiddos understand that to a degree, but it's still really difficult. And you still see all different sorts of responses. Think about that. I could write 2 or 3 books on the responses that I've seen through my years as a coach. And I could tell some unbelievable stories that you might laugh at some, you might gasp at some, see all kinds of responses. And if you think about it, that's what God sees from us. When He puts us in uncomfortable situations because He's wanting to use you, He's wanting to grow you, He's wanting to prepare you maybe for a mission. And we'll talk more about it, but just put that in your head. How do you respond, Jane?
Well, when he says God doesn't call us up, and my comment is that we have His Word.
Mm-hmm.
If we look to the Word, we can hear God speak. And there are words of comfort, there are encouragement.
You
There's
bet.
examples of what I just got to read in Jeremiah, where the Israelites were in a severe drought.
Mm-hmm.
And all that Jeremiah was talking about, what God really was using, the enemy of Babylon to punish them.
Right.
And drought was part of that. And it was, they digressed and worshiped the God. So what I guess my point is, if we are feeling uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we should go to the Word.
Yeah. And Jane's talking about, and I certainly don't want this to become a beat down of everyone. I'm not, even though the title of our series is uncomfortable, I'm not here to just make you as absolutely uncomfortable as I can make you each week when you come in and listen to this. But yeah, that's right. Yeah. She's mentioning just the blessings, really, that eventually do come when we're faithful to God putting us in those situations. We'll talk a lot more about that in the weeks ahead. But it is very important to understand that. Mm-hmm.
I
For sure.
take care of this.
Mhm.
If something else happens back, you get through it because it makes you stronger.
Mhm. She's just talking about how when we come out of the other side, we're stronger and better for it. It strengthens us. These difficulties that we go through.
And isn't a lot of that, you do this stuff and during the summer and the heat, you do all these things that make you really uncomfortable. So when it's not, then there's no problems.
Yeah. It feels like you're well conditioned for.
Well conditioned for it.
Mhm.
And y'all on your football team, with Texas, man, you can really get on there.
Yeah.
But that cold is another thing.
Yeah.
You got two extremes, so.
Sure.
And the question was, how does, do you feel uncomfortable when you get in uncomfortable situations? Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, you do. But like you said, it's the way you come out of it is how you grow.
Yeah. Agreed.
I like this analogy a lot.
Okay.
God is like using people as prayer. That makes me think about it in a lot of way.
A little different light.
Or like a conditioning.
Yeah.
Conditioning you for
You bet.
your life and whatever He has planned for you.
Mhm.
And like you said, the response. What is He going to do then now at this point in time?
Yeah.
Things
So
like that.
yeah, that's that new question. How are you doing? We just talked about this a little bit. How are you doing as God prepares, grows, tests, tries to use you, and you might kind of go, hell, I don't know, but I'll promise you, if you'll stop and think about it, and you'll go back and you'll think backwards 1 week, and you'll think backwards 2 weeks. And you'll think about your prayers to God. Prayers that maybe has asked God for specific things that you're working through in your life, dealing with in your life. And then sometimes we go through that week and we go through 2 weeks. And we're really kind of a little bit maybe angry-ish because hadn't really heard much from God, really hadn't addressed your prayers the way you had it all designed and drawn up. But then you think backwards. You think backwards again and you go, actually, I think He did. Help me to be more patient, Lord. Help me to be more resilient, to be able to work through some of this stuff. Help me to be more of a giving. Help me to be more of an encourager. Help me to have the toughness. And you go, He didn't. 3 weeks have gone by, a month, 6 months have gone by. He hadn't helped me do. And then you stop, you slow down, you look backwards, and you go, actually, He gave me lots and lots of opportunities to help me be that, and do that. And it's a little bit of kind of what you were talking about. It's a little bit of how we receive that in our mind and how we react to it as people that are trying to follow God, walk in His footsteps, walk alongside of Him, and do what He has planned for us. I don't know that we'll get through. Yep, Kelvin, go ahead.
Ecclesiastes chapter 5 is a good, I'm going to just say, life guide to help us think.
Kelvin's talking about Ecclesiastes.
Chapter 5. And at the end of the chapter,
And that was written by Mr. Ecclesiastes, is that? I don't, yeah, we all. Solomon.
but it is a very good chapter to make you think about what you're just talking about this morning. And
Mhm.
at the end of the chapter, it talks about a gift of God that shows up.
Yeah.
So,
We'll try to get through a lot of scriptures that'll show us some of this. I know I haven't gotten to them yet. Always, as a teacher, you always worry up here, I have enough material to get us through a class and all. You guys aren't worried about that. You're like, I wish he'd quit talking, but here we go.
Romans 12, verse 3,
Yeah.
kind of
Well,
say, every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance to the grace that God, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each one of you. So we can look at ourselves, and if we look at ourselves in the things that we've gone through, we're told to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're told to. So that fits right there with that.
I agree. I agree. Well, we've got just a few minutes left. I'll bring this back up. I mentioned it a while ago. The people God used to make most of his biggest impacts, I could probably say all of his biggest impacts as we read through the Bible, because again, I haven't found anyone otherwise, were all pulled out of their comfort zones to make that impact. Okay? Now I know you might go, well, that was a couple thousand, 3,000 years ago. I have a hard time believing that has changed. Okay? These are 4 that come to mind for me, and it might take us till next week that we actually read through all these, but I think of Joseph. I think of Moses and the calling that God gave him. I think about Jesus' mother and the job that the mission that she had to be to birth Jesus and take care of Jesus. And I think about Paul. Those are 4 that come to mind immediately for me that we're all pulled from comfort zones, maybe you could say. I don't have it pulled up on my phone, but you can go to Genesis 39:20. I'll try to pull that up real quick. Hit the wrong. We're talking about Joseph here. In Genesis chapter 39, I thought verse 20 was an interesting verse. Because Joseph has already been sold by his brothers. He'd already been tricked by his brothers, however you want to describe that. I think we all know the story of Joseph. And he's already in Egypt, and he's dealing with Potiphar's wife. We all know the story of the awkward and uncomfortable position she's putting him in. And it says in verse 20, Joseph's master took him and put him in prison. Most of us would consider prison to be pretty uncomfortable, I would think. Took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him, and he showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. What's interesting to me about Joseph, we're about to wrap this up today. We'll talk about these others who really got directly communicated with by God. Joseph didn't. We don't read of that. He was put in this, for one, sold into captivity. Imagine how difficult that must have been, how uncomfortable that must have been. Number 2, once he's gotten in there into Egypt, and then this situation comes up where he's thrown into prison, where most of us we'd consider prison to be a pretty uncomfortable situation, especially in a country that we do not belong to. And it doesn't say that God said, hey, here's my plan. Let me tell you how I've got this all drawn up, because it's going to be good. It's going to be fantastic. You're going to be just fine. God didn't give him that. But it does tell us that God took care of him and showed him kindness. And he had a plan, even though Joseph may not have known that. And so I'm just, maybe of all these people that we'll talk about in the coming weeks, I'm most impressed probably with Joseph. He's one of my all-time favorites because he did not have it all lined out. He didn't have hardly any indication at all of how God was using him. But God definitely had a plan for those uncomfortable moments and times that he put Joseph in. We're out of time. Thank you for listening this morning. We'll continue next week. Welcome. Thank you.